Peel open the pages of your favourite print title and you'll likely find that the imagery on display is as integral to the magazine story as any number of written words. From photojournalism to the art of picture taking, we'll explore the role of images in print today on The Stack. From Midori House in London, this is The Stack, 30 minutes of print industry analysis with me, Tom Edwards. It's been 45 years since what some might call the golden age of photojournalism came to an end, when Life magazine ceased to publish. But there are a few magazines carrying on the great tradition of rich photography on the printed page. We'll leaf through their pages shortly. This is The Stack on Monocle 24. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but in the case of the magazines that lay before us right now, a picture's worth surely far more than that. James Hyman, founder of the Hyman Archive, the world's largest magazine collection no less, knows a thing or two about magazines, past and present, and he joins us now here in the studio. Good to have you back, James.
Thank you. Lovely.
It's been a while. We think around a year, perhaps.
I think it was around about May when all the donations started flooding in from people.
Well, I was going to ask you about this. Let's have the numbers first to remind our listeners, or maybe inform them, if they're not aware prior. What are we up to? What kind of size of collection now? It's significant.
Because we're focusing a lot on the business side and getting it digitised, to be honest, we're not counting as vigorously and rigidly as we did. When it got in the Guinness Book of Records, it was 53,000 or so. It's doubled through those donations. About 280 different donors have totaled about another 60,000 magazines, and we're getting them every day. So conservatively, it's over 110,000 magazines.
That's quite a lot of magazines.
It is. So when you ask me to come here and sort of whittle things down, which is...
Just bring a few thousand in.
It's very hard.
So you haven't brought like a flatbed truck loaded?
No.
Just I think a tote bag or a backpack 6 or 7 with a few.
Can I just say, by the way, when you just said that thing about a picture is worth 1,000 words, you know that was quoted and coined from an actual magazine or newspaper 106 years ago by newspaper editor Tess Flanders.
There you go.
You see?
Well, that's been rather the sort of motif of the show today. And I guess actually the use of pictures, brilliant photography is kind of it's always something that we talk about when we look at magazines, almost by definition, but we'll talk about that today. Give us a bit of an overview. What have you got? You've got a few titles, some old favourites, familiar names.
Yeah,
a bit of archive rating's gone on. Where should we start?
I mean, an honorary mention to, I guess, Sunday supplements, colour supplements, which were designed really to literally breathe colour into the grey Sunday papers. So I just bought here a Sunday Times magazine from, about 30 years ago, May the 18th, 1986, with the headline, "Even Punks Have Parents," and feel free to comment on that.
That's brilliant. Well, it looks a bit like one of my family shots from the 1980s.
Were you a punk?
Not quite. Yeah, but you know that very soberly dressed and austere parents,
like a mini Boy George,
and then the sort of Boy George-esque tearaway. But in the middle. I'm just bringing that in again, the sort of the photojournalism, the reportage, to show the real importance of those magazines that, as I say, were brought in to add that dimension to Sunday papers. And actually, leafing through to the photo essay, which is the cover story in the Sunday Times magazine. I mean, just brilliant shots, family portraits, and you can see these very reserved, slightly uncertain parents, and then these kids looking much happier with their lot in life. But that is interesting about Sunday supplements. I mean, I think we kind of forget now there's such a barrage of imagery, full colour imagery as well. You forget what a explosive kind of presence, the change that made as they went from strength to strength. And like a lot of newspapers, as they went colour, it was relatively recently. I mean, that's the other thing that's amazing to think about.
Shall I go up to date? Bang up to date, really. They've just relaunched and redesigned the British Journal of Photography. I mean, you don't really get a better aggregator of photos and images. Look, honourable mentions again to Picture Post, Parry Match, Life and Time. I'll tell you why I chose that. Again, it's been redesigned, relaunched. But a lovely story, if you check our social media, the founder and editor or owner of British Journal of Photography, Mark, came down and donated their whole archive, both physically and digitally, to us, to the Hyman Archive. So that's one of the longest running magazines in the world, if not the longest running photographic magazine. Started in 1854. And I mean, it does what it says on the tin, and images to pore over, analyse.
It's a beautiful thing. Some friends of ours as well. They've been on the Stack fairly recently as well. And this is a truly beautiful journal. Well, is the cover image beautiful? It jumps out at you. Can you paint a picture of the
the cover shot for our listeners?
3 little pints of beer clasped towards a man's stomach.
Who looks like he's had a few already.
Exactly.
Over a long period of time to paint the picture. But just astonishing. And again, you always forget about the sort of stocks in here. There's incredible glossy photo quality paper in here and all sorts in between.
I think the owner, Mark, would wax on about that. They really took pride in what stock they were going to do when they relaunched and redesigned. I mean, he gave me a whole rundown on that. But yeah, I'm honoured that we have that whole archive now.
What does that mean, Jen? I mean, when you get, I don't know what to call it, almost a sort of a
collection,
a collection like that. I mean, has it changed how you look at the archive? Because it started, I guess, it's always been your personal passion, but it kind of feels like you're presiding over something bigger than that now, isn't it? It's a resource. You feel like a community resource almost.
It really is. The stories that go with those donations, the people who, we often tag it's the final resting place for magazines. And these people who kindly donate, really, I guess there's a bit of responsibility. It's bigger than us all. I love, part of my vision for the project is it's like a community thing. It's the people's archive to an extent.
And what about, I guess, these donors give their collections, they're happy that it finds a place where it's going to be loved and looked after and preserved. What about the flip side? I mean, people presumably then in increasing numbers must come to you and say, can I have access to the archive? Do you have copies of this and this obscure title? It must be amazing if you can connect people with things that they've long lost.
We are getting people requesting either a specific image, specific article, academics, students, creatives, which is why the logical conclusion for it really is 2 things: physically to have a museum and digitally to have it digitized, because we cannot often cope with if 100 people want this magazine, this article, that image, to flick through all these New Yorkers, whatever we've got.
It's in your head somewhere, but that's not the easiest filing system, I guess, for external users. Where should we go next?
Okay, so I also chose, very difficult to do this, but on that kind of reportage, photojournalism bit, I went for Colours. Fantastic magazine, as you can see here. I've chosen, there's a war issue. That's a pretty gruesome shot there. Someone's head being blown off.
Hard to look at.
Yeah, it was the genius warped mind of one of its founders, Oliviero Toscani. He was a former art director for Benetton. So again, I like the way this guy has creatively twisted and I guess perverted imagery in these magazines. Look here, almost fetishized objects. This is another issue, Gifts for the Family, with a condom on the front cover.
And that's very much, people will be familiar with Toscani's kind of approach.
Yeah.
It's not to shock per se, but to shock as a byproduct of pushing the envelope was always something, sat very comfortably.
Courted controversy.
And it's important, isn't it?
Yeah. Again, I think there was that famous thing where he had the AIDS patient dying in a bed, the prisoner on death row, but really pushing the power of image. So, again, even mundane images like the one you're flicking through there, just Gifts for the Family, really striking the way he's made those objects jump out at you from a magazine.
And it's interesting, I wonder, on these more, I don't know what you'd call them, sort of confrontational images almost.
Yeah.
Is it harder to do that now? There's more magazines. People on the internet can find pretty much whatever they want to find at the click of a few keys. Does that make it more difficult to shock with your image selection, with your graphics? Or do you think in a way...
Maybe we're all...
It's a reminder of its power actually in print.
That's a good point. Maybe we get anaesthetized by seeing so much stuff through visual media, and there's so much of an influx and glut of it now that, yes, harder to shock, but you can still do it. Look, if you look back at some of the heyday of those colours in the 90s, they still shocked. You've just got to work harder at it. Interesting enough, actually, one point I wanted to mention, and it's a kind of weird sideline irony to this on that war sort of reportage stuff. On Facebook, that Pulitzer Prize guy who took that shot of the naked girl running down in Vietnam, there was that whole controversy, Facebook kept censoring and pulling it down. I just find that interesting, again, the power of the image now almost being censored by these platforms.
Particularly with that, it was a news image. It was a reportage.
It was a Pulitzer Prize-winning image.
It wasn't an ad campaign for Benetton designed to sort of yank people's chains.
Absolutely,
it was a legit piece.
It won one of the World Press photos as well in '73. Just quickly, the guy Egil Hansen, he was editor-in-chief and CEO of Aftenposten. He wrote to Facebook about that image, saying it's a concern they were unable to distinguish between child pornography and famous war photographs, as well as an unwillingness to allow space for good judgment. I think that's interesting, again, how the image now is also being manipulated by being censored on all these platforms.
It's absolutely fascinating. James, it's an absolute delight. What's next? I guess you're still encouraging people to get in touch.
So look, if you've got anything to donate or you need research, you do need images, articles, we are a resource. So hymanarchive.com. We are slowly but surely forging that path to digitising. So support from rights holders, photographers, journalists, good people like yourselves, that will keep us alive.
And just a final note, is there anything that you're still tracking down? Is there an elusive particular, is there a sort of, the Kaiser Soze of magazines? What would be
There's millions of them. I mean, honestly, that part of my anxiety is gone. I mean, literally after here, I was going to quickly rush to a good little haunt, the Book and Comic Exchange in Notting Hill. I put away a stash of stuff. I'd never even seen this before. Some music magazine called, I can't remember, Unfound, Unsound or whatever from the 80s. That is endless. There's millions of them. They're like mole bashing. Find 1 million more sprout up.
In the best possible way.
Yes.
James Hyman, it's brilliant to speak with you. Thanks for coming to see us, as always. More power to you and the archive. Keep us posted with further developments. You're listening to The Stack on Monocle 24.